What have you learnt from your audience feedback? Following the production of my main product and ancillary texts, I virally distributed my website, poster and trailer through social networking sites such as Facebook and Tumblr, onto film forums, and also asked several members of my target audience to a casual interview to discuss their feelings towards my product. I received a considerable amount of feedback in a short amount of time, and the majority of it was very positive, though the criticisms were purely constructive. Opening with the trailer feedback, I uploaded my main product onto Facebook and received feedback through likes, comments and private messages. I received very positive feedback from females fitting my targeted audience of 18+ art enthusiasts. For instance, a young graphic student, aged 18, said, "So amazing, Meg. Well done, chick." The majority of the positive comments I received on this site were brief and relatively uninformative of what was specifically done well, though from the amount of positive feedback I received on Facebook, I learnt I had created a trailer that my target audience received well, and ultimately feel now my main product was an overall success. A few people were more explicit with their comments. For example, a female media student, also aged 18, wrote, "You can really appreciate the massive amount of work you put into it. The editing is amazing, and the storyline is also good," informing me that she felt the editing of my trailer was effective, and also through her commenting on the storyline, it is clear that she understood the narrative of my film through the trailer, and so I feel I have successfully conveyed the plotline to my film B without revealing too much in the main product. An aspiring architect, also aged 18, gave me very detailed feedback on what he felt was good about my product over a series of messages. I learnt from his feedback he particularly enjoyed the entirely protagonist-narrated sequence, saying, "At the start, when you were talking, it sounded amazing, your voice went so well with it all," and that the sound and the visuals of the opening to my trailer were particularly cohesive. The 18-year-old male even went on to make a cross-media reference by comparing the non-diegetic narration to when Lana Del Rey speaks at the start or end of her songs. Through this individual's comparison of the sound element to an indie pop artist very popular with the alternative youth audience I am targeting, I have interpreted that this element is not only cohesive, but also stylistically appropriate for the alternative youth audience I am targeting, as this artist is generally very popular with the audience. Finally, the male concludes by writing, "I get shivers as a result of this narration, which has taught me this example of my target audience has taken, as Hall describes, the preferred reading of my text, as I've been successful in manipulating my audience through this product to feel unnerved." In another message, the student then told me how he had showed my trailer, which demonstrated to me the success of viral marketing in independent production, to my family, my cousin, and some family friends. The positive feedback he passed along to me from them taught me that I had a valid market beyond my target market, and that my product, which I feared was niche to only young adults interested in psychological dramas, was actually accessible to a much more universal audience of ages. More categorically, this particular feedback reinforced what the earlier mentioned media student had discussed, in that the group said the narrative wasn't hard to follow. This repeated positive feedback on the understandability of my product making it more reliable. They then went on to compliment my usage of enigmas, but it also gave that mysterious streak that makes you want to know more. So I was assured from my audience feedback that I had achieved the correct balance of a clear plot line without showing too much, and that my hooks were successful in making the audience want to continue watching to the silver screen. In terms of cinematography and genre, my work was also complimented by this group, as the student informed me that they described my shots as really well filmed, that they linked very well to the theme, made it mysterious and intriguing, which I interpret as a comment on the shots of the opening sequence, in which I avoided showing the protagonist's face for the first 30 seconds, and so I learnt from this audience feedback that my camera shots and movement were found appropriate by my audience for the dark tone associated with psychological dramas, and so I was successful in constructing this syntactic element. This detailed audience response also praised in editing the flashing girl, a reference to my mid-two-shot jump cut sequence, for they noted the suggestions it gives about her being real, informing me that my product was well received by my audience, and that again the preferred reading was taken of the narrative theme through the element of editing. I received this praisal on the jump cut multiple times. A 20-year-old male vlogger also commented, "I especially enjoyed the disappearing girl." The repetition of this compliment makes the conclusion likelier that this sequence was a dramatic highlight of my trailer, which also means it is more likely to become a chosen conversation point of the trailer. The shared appreciation enforcing McQuail's point of benefiting personal relationships as a part of uses and gratification. With all of the excellent feedback I received on Facebook of my trailer, I did also receive several criticisms. Continuing with the lengthy message the aspiring young architect sent me after he had shown his family and friends my trailer, he passed along the criticism. The only thing that someone did say was that it was slightly lengthy. From this particular piece of audience feedback, I have learnt that my project could be made even more effective by being a little harsher in the editing process through spending a longer time considering which shots were dispensable or of less cruciality, and removing them. That being said, this criticism was only made in that one instance across all the sites I posted my trailer on, and so it could just be a personal preference. I tried to create a trailer long enough to clearly convey the complex narrative, which leads me on to my next criticism. The 20-year-old vlogger previously mentioned criticised the story was only made obvious when it hit about 50 seconds left, suggesting to me that this trailer could be interpreted as hard to follow initially for some people. That being said, though this piece of feedback did inform me that there may be initial discrepancies, I wouldn't want the storyline to become clear at any point before the halfway mark, as I designated that first half to the establishment of this disturbed protagonist, and so I wouldn't change anything. After all, if the storyline was clear from the beginning of the trailer, there wouldn't be much point in watching the rest of the trailer. This young male then went on to say, "If I was you, I would have made it a little more emotional." Though personally speaking, I am content with the amount of emotion construed, and I feel it is appropriate for the psychological drama I am working in. If it was any more emotional, I would say the trailer would better embody a film trailer of a rom-com or a drama genre. My final criticism on Facebook came from a young male film student whose comments regarded the post-production work of my trailer, in which he himself is very familiar with. The first of his constructive suggestions was to use colour correction, as he wrote, "It looks like really saturated, unless you were going for that look." This feedback coincides with my own feelings towards the colouring of my footage, for I discussed extensively throughout my planning I was considering the use of filters on my images, both still and moving. I actually did make a small use of colour adjustments in Final Cut Pro, but due to the tight turnaround of my product and a shift in thinking in that I would have preferred my main product to be colour filtered, but ultimately I did not think the absence of this effect detracted from my product. I didn't use effects as much as I was planning to do. However, after having received this feedback, I now know if I was to return to my product and alter it, I would use a slightly desaturating, blue tinted colour filter, as this student is right in thinking that the picture is not necessarily lacking, but could be made more effective in creating the correct tone of my genre when adjusted. The film student then goes on to discuss the borders of my film. I would suggest that bringing down the top and bottom to give it that cinematic feel, but that might not work that well depending on how you framed your shots. I appreciated this member of my audience's consideration to such a specific element, and following this feedback researched film picture proportions. I discovered, however, that there is no one conventional proportion, and that while many films bring down the top and bottom to create a widescreen picture, it is just as acceptable to film to the proportions that I had done. That being said, from this bit of audience feedback, I learnt to not just assume the camera will film in the frame I desire as standard, and in future projects I will most definitely be more aware of the shape of the frame in addition to how I fit in the mise-en-scene. Moving on to forums, I posted my trailer onto Empire Online's film forum, Filmmakers Workshop. Before even receiving feedback, I learnt from putting my work onto a forum for feedback that it was crucial to put my trailer into the correct section, otherwise I would end up with the wrong audience watching and a host of angry film flamers. I also learnt from my response rate, and having compared that to the replies received by other thread starters on the particular forum's home, that people rarely receive any feedback at all on these particular forums, though the hit counter does indicate my thread has at least been read, and this, a substantial number of people, given the time frame, have been given the direct link to my trailer, again demonstrating viral marketing's ability to reach my audience. In terms of audience feedback itself received on this site, while my thread currently stands at having received over 150 hits, I only received one reply. A user under the moniker Lumpy Space wrote, This audience feedback reaffirmed several highlights of my trailer mentioned in my Facebook feedback, in that the user feels the soundtrack again really adds to the eeriness, and that the use of camera framing and movements was well considered and successful. The user's personal mentioning of the nice cool on including Little White Lies also informs me that I was successful in my attempt to use a well-respected publisher within my targeted market. Her small complaint of the title caption being quite big for the minimalistic style I think you were trying to create, and mentioning that it detracts from the title itself, I think are very good points. I was trying to make the text in the caption prominent through a substantial size font, though this audience feedback has taught me that what I had originally considered to be substantial was actually oversized. And now I know, not just in trailers, but in other media forms, to really assess the sizing of subordinate features as to whether they are actually subordinate in appearance. Finally, I posted my trailer onto my Tumblr blog, a site in which members were again, though not as much so as Empire Online's forums, somewhat reluctant to respond. I received several pieces of feedback in the form of reblogs, comments, and likes. A young female going by the moniker Arty Kind of Girl liked the post, which again indicated to me my main product was deemed suitable for my target audience and approved by them themselves. An American young female user also praised my work by commenting, "Hearing your voice for the first time was just magical," which could indicate how successful she felt the narration, asynchronous and diegetic dialogue to be, or alternatively it could be deemed magical as she has simply never heard my voice before, a discrepancy disadvantageous of using viral marketing. That being said, I did also receive a much clearer response in the caption of my reblogged trailer by a 19-year-old British female who praised the traditional style's construction and blatancy by writing, "Beautiful, especially love the traditional style that ran throughout, with the serif typography, the picturesque woodsy locations, and the classical piano music playing." This feedback has presented to me that again the preferred reading of my text was received, and so my careful decisions of the serif over sans serif conventional typography debate, selections of locations as part of the film's mise-en-scene, and the classical soundtrack were all felt to be particularly appropriate and cohesive of the period English prose style that I was trying to construct. The girl then went on to name two particular shots, the piano shot and the psychiatrist shot, and told me that they reminded her of Anton Corbijin's Control. These two low-key shots were examples of the very few shots I had actually manipulated the colour of due to the mood I felt was integral to each of them requiring such adjustment. And through this member of my audience's reference to this art house docudrama, I've learned that I was successful in creating a generic likeness through the shared syntactic element of my cinematography filter.